Medieval marketplaces were engineered to control your every step and purchase. The layout of stalls and pathways formed a psychological trap designed to guide crowds and empty purses with precision. This was the merchant's maze, a high-stakes game of influence where architecture became a tool for profit. You will learn to see the hidden patterns in every marketplace you visit, unlocking a new awareness of how space shapes spending. How did narrow alleys force impulse buys, and why were certain goods always placed just out of reach? By the end, you will never walk through a shopping district the same way again. What do you think is the most powerful tool for influencing someone's choices? These designs were born from a powerful collaboration between authority and commerce. Town councils and powerful merchant guilds did not leave the flow of money to chance. They drew up plans, debated layouts, and enacted strict rules governing where each type of good could be sold. Their goal was singular: to ensure every visitor to the market would spend as much as possible. Imagine the entrance to a bustling town square. The first stalls you would encounter were not selling simple vegetables or common wares. They were reserved for the most luxurious and expensive items: gleaming silks, intricate metalwork, and exotic spices. This was a deliberate strategy. Your senses were immediately overwhelmed by the finest offerings, setting a high anchor for value and priming your mind to accept higher prices for everything you saw afterward. Natural features of the landscape were co-opted into this grand design. A river was not just a source of water, it was a natural barrier that forced foot traffic along a specific, predictable route. A town wall did not just offer protection, it created a limited number of gateways, each one becoming a prime spot for merchant guilds to tax goods and for savvy sellers to capture a captive audience. These medieval planners possessed an intuitive yet brilliant understanding of human psychology. They knew that a crowded, narrow alleyway would create a sense of urgency and competition. They understood that placing a baker next to a blacksmith was a terrible idea, but placing a baker next to a brewer was a recipe for increased sales. They were the original architects of impulse, masters of manipulating crowds and coins through the silent language of stone, wood, and space. Their innovations did not vanish with the Middle Ages. They simply evolved, becoming the blueprint for every shopping mall and department store you walk into today. But what specific psychological triggers did these ancient designs pull, and how do they still work on us centuries later? This sense of being herded was no accident. The narrow, winding pathways of the medieval market were a masterclass in crowd control, a concept we now call the funnel effect. Imagine trying to walk quickly through a dense forest with low-hanging branches. You are forced to slow down, to pay attention to your immediate surroundings, and to navigate each twist and turn carefully. That is exactly what these cramped alleys did to shoppers. The wide, open square at the market's entrance would compress into these tight corridors, slowing the crowd's progress to a crawl. This was not an inconvenience for the merchants, it was the entire point. Your pace was no longer your own. You were moved along at the speed the market's architects had chosen for you, a leisurely amble that maximized your exposure to every stall. With your movement restricted, you were pushed into close, unavoidable proximity with the goods on display. You could not help but brush against bolts of fine cloth, smell the spices laid out on tables, or hear the sizzle of meat pies from a nearby cookshop. This constant sensory bombardment was a direct assault on your willpower, dramatically increasing the chances of an impulse purchase. The design also created a powerful psychological urgency. With people pressing behind you, you felt a subtle pressure to make a decision and keep moving, a fear that if you hesitated, a desirable item might be snatched up by the person next to you. This manufactured competition turned shopping into a subtle, high-stakes game. We can see this strategy perfected in places like the Great Cloth Hall in Ypres. Its vast interior was intentionally subdivided by pillars and low arches, creating a series of these narrow channels that would triple the amount of time a visitor spent wandering past the most expensive textiles. This architectural trick proved a fundamental rule of commerce, that sometimes physically limiting a customer's freedom of movement is the fastest way to liberate the coins from their purse. But slowing a crowd down was only half the battle. The real genius was in what they forced you to see along the way. The chaotic noise of the market was a finely tuned instrument of commerce. As you were funneled through those narrow alleys, your ears were assaulted by a carefully orchestrated symphony of salesmanship. The rhythmic clang of a coppersmith beating a pot was not just the sound of labor, it was a beacon cutting through the crowd to draw you toward his stall. The baker's bell, ringing to signal a fresh batch of bread, created a sense of urgency that was impossible to ignore, and the constant, overlapping shouts of vendors hawking their wares were not random noise. They were a calculated effort to fracture your attention, making it difficult to focus on any single thought beyond the immediate, enticing offer right in front of you. This sensory assault was a masterclass in disorientation. The goal was to overload your cognitive capacity, to push your brain into a state where careful calculation and price comparison became almost impossible. Your rational mind, the part that might question a price or decide to wait, was being systematically shut down by a barrage of stimuli. You were left operating on instinct and emotion, which are far easier for a skilled merchant to manipulate. The sharp, alluring aroma of roasting meat from one stall would mingle with the sweet smell of honey cakes from another, and the exotic scent of spices from a third. These smells triggered primal responses of hunger and desire, physically pulling you toward a purchase before you had even processed the thought. Vivid colors played a crucial role in this strategy. Stalls were draped in the brightest fabrics available, deep blues from woad, rich reds from madder root, and vibrant yellows. Gleaming pewter jugs and polished metalwork were arranged to catch the sunlight, creating flashes of light that danced in your peripheral vision and demanded your gaze. This transformed the marketplace from a simple commercial district into a carnival, a spectacle of abundance where normal rules seemed suspended. The traveler Ibn Battuta often wrote of his journeys through foreign markets, describing them not with the dry eye of an accountant, but with the wonder of a man completely captivated by the overwhelming spectacle of sounds, smells, and sights. In this environment of pure exhilaration, the act of spending money ceased to be a transactional chore. It became part of the entertainment, a way to participate more fully in the thrilling chaos. Your purse strings were loosened not by a logical decision, but by the sheer, intoxicating joy of the experience. You were not just buying a spiced sausage, you were buying a piece of the excitement. But once a merchant had your attention and your guard was down, they employed an even more subtle art, the ancient psychology of pricing and placement. This calculated chaos set the stage for a merchant's most powerful tool, the illusion of scarcity. Rare and desirable goods were never placed within easy reach. Instead, they were elevated on high shelves or locked within sturdy chests, positioned to be seen by all but accessed by few. A bundle of precious saffron or a bolt of Chinese silk would be displayed like a crown jewel, forcing potential buyers to crane their necks for a better look. This simple act of looking upward created a powerful subconscious link between the item and concepts of value, exclusivity, and even reverence. The item was not just a product, it was a prize, set apart from the common wares at eye level. This strategic placement preyed on a deep and ancient fear, the fear of missing out. When you saw that rare spice from the East displayed so prominently yet kept at a distance, a subtle anxiety took hold. You were not just looking at a commodity, you were witnessing a limited opportunity. The very architecture suggested that there might not be enough to go around, that the person behind you might get the last one. This manufactured competition turned a simple purchase into a competitive hunt, compelling buyers to act quickly and agree to higher prices before the chance vanished. In the great trading hubs like Venice, this tactic was engineered directly into the market's architecture. The Rialto market, the commercial heart of the Republic, was designed with specialized stalls for different goods. The most valuable imports were often sold from raised loggias or behind counters that created a physical barrier between the buyer and the object of their desire. This barrier was not for protection alone, it was a psychological divider, reinforcing the item's status and making the moment of purchase feel like a privileged transaction. The merchant held all the power, controlling access to a seemingly scarce resource. This artificial scarcity was a brilliant psychological trick, transforming everyday shopping into a thrilling, high-stakes game where the most coveted treasures were always just slightly out of reach. But if a customer managed to resist these tricks of placement and pressure, merchants had one final, deeply personal strategy to secure a sale. Beyond the noise and the narrow alleys lay the market's most ingenious trap, a path with no exit. Many medieval marketplaces were deliberately designed as circles or ovals, creating a loop that was impossible to escape without completing the full circuit. Once you stepped onto this winding path, you surrendered your sense of direction to the architect's grand plan. There were no dead ends to turn back from, no shortcuts to take. Your only option was to move forward, passing stall after stall in an endless parade of temptation. This forced circulation was a masterstroke of commercial engineering, ensuring that every visitor, regardless of their original intent, would be exposed to the entire marketplace at least once. The design played on a basic human desire for completion. Starting a loop creates a subconscious need to finish it, to see the path through to its end. This psychological impulse kept people moving long after their initial errand was done, transforming a simple trip for bread into a prolonged journey past silversmiths, furriers, and spice merchants. Each new stall presented another opportunity for an unplanned purchase, another chance for a clever vendor to catch your eye and empty your purse. We can see this principle perfected in places like the Round Church in Cambridge. During its seasonal markets, the circular layout of the churchyard created a natural flow that kept the crowd in constant, gentle motion. A shopper could not simply buy a candle and leave. They were compelled to walk the entire circle, passing by dozens of other vendors selling everything from hot pies to imported leather gloves. This geometric design was far more than an architectural curiosity. It was a revenue-generating engine. By eliminating dead ends, the market's planners also eliminated easy exits, ensuring that every potential customer spent the maximum amount of time surrounded by goods. This continuous exploration was the lifeblood of the market, dramatically increasing the odds of those crucial impulse buys that separated a profitable day from a slow one. The circular market was a beautiful, efficient trap, proving that sometimes the most powerful tool for separating a person from their money is a path that simply refuses to let them go. This deliberate looping created a perfect stage for the market's star performers, the anchor stalls. Certain vendors held a power far beyond the goods they sold. The baker, the butcher, or a well-known chandler were not placed by accident. They were strategically positioned at the very heart of the marketplace or at its busiest entryways, acting as powerful magnets for human traffic. Everyone needed bread and meat, so their stalls naturally became the most frequented destinations, the beating heart of the market's daily rhythm. Organizers of great fairs like the famed Champagne fairs understood this power completely. Historical records show they would often offer these prime, coveted locations to specific, popular merchants for a lower rent or special privileges. The exchange was simple. The merchant received the best spot, and the fair organizers received a guaranteed, constant stream of customers right where they wanted them. This was a brilliant symbiotic relationship. The anchor stall, buzzing with activity, created a powerful hub. Shoppers would cluster around the baker, buying their daily loaf, but then their eyes would naturally wander to the neighboring stalls. A cheese merchant set up next to the baker would suddenly find his products in high demand. A vendor selling fine knives might find a captive audience of cooks and housewives already gathered nearby. The popularity of the anchor did not just benefit itself, it spilled over, creating a ripple effect of economic activity that lifted sales for every smaller vendor fortunate enough to be in its orbit. This strategy transformed the chaotic market into an efficient ecosystem. The anchor stall set the economic tone for the entire area, its constant crowd providing a steady flow of potential customers for goods they never knew they needed until they saw them. It illustrated a fundamental truth of commerce, that sometimes the most valuable product a merchant can sell is not his own wares but the crowd itself. These subtle divisions extended far beyond mere crowd control. Market architects mastered the art of social engineering through stone and wood, crafting invisible lines that everyone intuitively understood. A simple change in the cobblestones from rough-hewn granite to smooth, expensive marble signaled a shift in territory. A low wall no higher than your knee was not there to block your path, but to subtly guide your choices and define your place in the market's social order. These were psychological barriers designed to sort the crowd into in-groups and out-groups without a single word being spoken. Wealthy patrons, seeing the finer pavement and recognizing the more luxurious goods on the other side of that low wall, would naturally gravitate toward that exclusive zone. They were not just buying products, they were buying an experience that affirmed their status. Meanwhile, shoppers with lighter purses would instinctively remain in the areas marked by common stone, feeling neither the pressure nor the invitation to cross into a more expensive section. This segmentation was a commercial goldmine for vendors. A merchant selling common pottery in the affordable zone could use a straightforward, volume-based pitch, shouting about low prices and durable goods to attract a crowd. Just a few steps away, behind a decorative stone archway, a silversmith knew his clientele expected a different approach. His sales strategy relied on quiet conversation, on emphasizing the unique artistry and exclusivity of each piece to justify a much higher price. The market's design did the hard work of pre-sorting his customers for him, ensuring only those most likely to splurge ever reached his stall. In the great market halls of medieval Paris, like Les Halles, these strategies were refined to a science. The layout reinforced the rigid social hierarchies of the day while simultaneously optimizing profits from every level of society. A noblewoman could procure her imported lace and perfumes in a relatively quiet, dignified section, separated from the bustling chaos of the fishmongers and butchers. This manipulation of space went beyond movement, it shaped perception itself. The exclusive area felt quieter, more refined, and more valuable simply because of the architectural cues that defined it. The accessible area felt vibrant, competitive, and cheap, encouraging rapid, volume-driven sales. The market catered to both the ego of the elite and the economy of the commoner, ensuring every person, regardless of their wealth, felt they were in the right place. This ancient tactic of dividing to conquer purses reveals a profound truth about human psychology. We are deeply conditioned to respond to our environment, and the simple act of stepping over a threshold can completely reset our expectations about value and our willingness to spend. Even the worst goods in the market had a vital role to play. Savvy merchants understood that a customer's perception of value was not absolute, but entirely relative. A beautifully crafted leather satchel might seem expensive on its own, but place it next to a shoddily made, only slightly cheaper version, and its superior quality suddenly becomes undeniable. This was the decoy effect in action, a psychological lever pulled with precision through deliberate stall arrangement. The decoy item, whether it was a lumpy clay pot or a coarse wool tunic, was not meant to sell. Its sole purpose was to make the neighboring premium product appear far more attractive by comparison, transforming a questionable expense into an obvious bargain. Merchant guild records from 15th century Flanders show this strategy was calculated down to the penny. A ledger might list 3 grades of linen cloth. The cheapest was thin and poorly dyed. The most expensive was exceptionally fine, but it was the mid-tier option, positioned squarely between them, that saw its sales surge by nearly a third. The presence of the inferior decoy made the mid-tier cloth seem like a spectacular value, while the existence of the ultra-premium option made it feel accessible. This was not a random discovery, it was a practiced art of cognitive manipulation. The butcher would display a tough cut of meat at a high price to make his prime steak seem reasonably costed. The candlemaker would place a smoky, tallow-based candle next to his clean-burning beeswax versions, making the higher price for quality feel like a wise investment rather than an extravagance. They turned the natural human instinct to compare into their greatest sales ally, ensuring that every item on the table, no matter how unappealing, served the ultimate goal of guiding the customer toward the most profitable choice. The decoy was the unsung hero of the marketplace, a sacrifice play that made everything else look like a treasure. The relentless pressure to spend was governed by a hidden clock. Medieval markets were not fixed in time, they pulsed and shifted with the rhythm of the day and the turning of the seasons. This temporal engineering was an 8th layer of manipulation, where the very hours of operation and the annual calendar became tools to maximize profit from every possible human mood and need. A shopper arriving at dawn would find a completely different marketplace than one who strolled in after midday. The layout was fluid, designed to match the psychological state of the crowd at any given moment. In the brisk morning hours, the market catered to purpose and efficiency. Stalls selling essential staples like bread, milk, and vegetables dominated the main pathways. The goal was to capture the household provisioner, the cook or servant on a strict errand with a specific list and a limited amount of time. The architecture facilitated a quick in and out, but only after passing a gauntlet of other morning necessities. But as the sun reached its zenith, a subtle transformation began. The butchers and bakers, having sold their daily stock, might pack up. In their place or in newly opened sections of the square, a different kind of merchant would appear. These afternoon stalls dealt in luxuries, silks, silverware, exotic spices, and finely crafted toys. Their customers were no longer in a hurry. They were leisured ladies and gentlemen browsing for pleasure, their defenses lowered by a full stomach and a relaxed pace. The market's design shifted to accommodate lingering, with wider aisles for conversation and stalls arranged to encourage comparison and fantasy. This deliberate scheduling exploited a fundamental shift in mindset, from the practical needs of the morning to the discretionary desires of the afternoon. The most extreme example of this temporal manipulation was the seasonal fair. For a few weeks each year, ordinary town squares and fields were utterly transformed by temporary architecture. Grand wooden stalls were erected, often in concentric circles or long, winding rows, creating a maze of exclusive temptation available for a limited time only. Records from great English fairs, like the St. Giles Fair in Winchester, show how these constructions were meticulously planned to generate a fever pitch of excitement and urgency. The very temporariness of the structures screamed that this was a special occasion, an event not to be missed. Your chance to buy that Flemish tapestry or that Italian glass was now or never, perhaps for another whole year. This manufactured scarcity, built on the foundation of time itself, was devastatingly effective. Account books from these events reveal that daily revenues could easily double compared to a standard market day, all because the architecture was not just built in space, but choreographed across time. The market's masters understood that a person's willingness to spend is never constant, and they built entire worlds designed to bend that willingness to its absolute breaking point. Every entrance was a promise, and every exit a final temptation. The thresholds of the medieval marketplace were not mere openings in a wall. They were carefully engineered psychological portals designed to control your entire experience from the moment you arrived to the moment you left. Stepping through the main gate was like entering a theater. You were crossing from the ordinary world into a realm of heightened sensation where different rules applied. To mark this transition, these entrances were often spectacular. You might be greeted by a vibrant flower seller offering free blooms to ladies, or a friendly baker handing out small samples of honey cake. These were not acts of charity, they were calculated psychological maneuvers. A free sample immediately created a sense of reciprocal obligation, a subtle feeling that you now owed the market something in return. It also lowered your defenses, engaging your senses and priming your mind for the generosity of spending. Your guard came down as your wallet came out. The exit, however, was a completely different kind of psychological space. After hours of sensory overload and calculated spending, you would finally make your way toward a gate, your purse lighter and your arms perhaps full. It was at this precise moment of mental exhaustion and accomplishment that you would encounter the final trap. Positioned right before the threshold back to the normal world were stalls selling small, irresistible luxuries. A vendor with brightly colored ribbons and cheap rings, another with little pots of sweets or roasted nuts. The logic was impeccable. Having made all your planned purchases, you might feel a pang of guilt or fatigue, but the low cost of these trifles made them seem inconsequential. You had already spent so much, what was one more penny for a treat? Or perhaps you felt you deserved a small reward for your labors. This final, almost automatic purchase was the market's last victory, ensuring you left with every coin spent. We can see the ultimate refinement of this threshold strategy in places like the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. While built later, its design philosophy was a direct heir to these medieval experiments. Its massive, ornate gates funnel visitors into a world apart, while the exits are famously lined with shops selling Turkish delight and small souvenirs, a tradition centuries in the making. By controlling these first and last impressions, the market's architects wrote the entire story of your visit. They framed the narrative, ensuring it began with wide-eyed anticipation and ended with a final, often regrettable, reach into an empty purse. The journey between those 2 points was a masterclass in manipulation, but it was the gates themselves that held the entire illusion in place. This density was not a byproduct of chaos, but a carefully engineered tool of persuasion. A lone shopper might hesitate over a purchase, questioning the price or the quality, but a shopper surrounded by a jostling, eager crowd found their doubts swept away by a powerful psychological force, the need to belong. Merchants and market planners understood this instinct intimately, and they manipulated the very architecture to manufacture these crowded hubs on demand. By narrowing pathways or creating small, enclosed courtyards just before a popular stall, they could artificially compress the flow of people, creating the illusion of a frantic, can't-miss buying opportunity. The crowd itself became the most compelling advertisement, a living, breathing testament to the stall's desirability. You did not need to read a sign or hear a sales pitch. The press of bodies told you everything you needed to know that this was the place to be. Historical accounts from travelers often mention this magnetic pull, describing how they would abandon their intended route to join a gathering throng, driven by a simple, powerful fear that they might be missing out on the best deal or the finest product in the entire market. This was social proof written in stone and flesh, a vicious cycle where popularity bred more popularity, and solitude became a merchant's greatest curse. A quiet stall, no matter how good its wares, was often bypassed as shoppers instinctively flocked to the noise and energy of the crowd, their individual judgment supplanted by the wisdom of the multitude. The market's design ensured that this wisdom was never left to chance, guiding the herd to precisely where the profits were highest. But if a shopper somehow resisted the pull of the crowd and the lure of the decoy, merchants had one final, deeply personal line of defense, a tool that turned the simple act of conversation into a precise financial instrument. The chaotic symphony of the market was not left to chance. Master architects weaponized the very air itself, turning sound into a precise tool for herding crowds. They designed spaces where specific noises would travel further and with more clarity, creating an invisible map of acoustic influence. A vaulted stone ceiling in a covered market hall did not just keep out the rain, it acted as a natural amplifier, catching the call of a favored vendor and projecting it across the entire space, making his stall seem like the undeniable center of activity. The sharp, metallic clink of coins changing hands was another sound they sought to enhance. This specific noise, echoing from a stone archway or bouncing down a narrow alley, was a powerful subconscious signal of trust and successful commerce. It created an aura of legitimacy and bustling trade, assuring hesitant shoppers that others were spending freely and that it was safe for them to do the same. Some spots were engineered for secrecy and intimacy. A slight curve in a wall or a specific alcove could create a whispering gallery, where a merchant could murmur the details of a special deal or a discounted price to a select customer. The sound would travel perfectly to their ears but no further, making the buyer feel privileged and special, privy to an exclusive opportunity that was not available to the common crowd. This acoustic trick fostered a powerful sense of complicity and urgency, often sealing a sale that might have been lost in open haggling. Conversely, other areas were designed to mask sound. The din from a noisy animal pen or the distracting clamor of a blacksmith's forge might be strategically dampened by thick walls or baffling corridors, ensuring those unpleasant distractions did not interfere with the carefully crafted atmosphere of luxury in the nearby silk merchants' quarter. Modern acoustic engineers have built digital models of these ancient marketplaces, and the results are startling. Their simulations show how a shout from a specific stall in London's Cheapside market could be clearly heard dozens of meters away, funneled and focused by the precise width of the street and the height of the overhanging buildings. This was not a happy accident of medieval urban planning. It was a deliberate design feature. By controlling what you heard and from where, the market's masters could guide your feet without you ever realizing you were being led. Your ears became their compass, pointing you toward the sounds of excitement, trust, and exclusive deals, and steadily away from the silent stalls of their competitors. In the merchant's maze, even the air you breathed was filled with invisible hands, gently pushing you toward the next purchase. Even the weather was not beyond the market master's control. Architects designed for the sun and the rain, turning the elements into tools for managing human behavior. On a clear, bright day, the marketplace would sprawl across its open squares, using the wide spaces to prevent bottlenecks and allow crowds to flow freely between attractions. But when clouds gathered, the entire market could transform in an instant. Retractable awnings would unfurl from stone walls, and the crowd would instinctively migrate toward the permanent cover of vaulted market halls. This was not merely about comfort, it was a brilliant act of crowd compression. The same number of people, now sheltered from a sudden downpour, were funneled into a much smaller, warmer, and more intimate space. Their pace slowed, their dwell time increased, and they were pressed even closer to the inviting glow of a candle maker's stall or the warm aroma of a spice merchant's wares. A rainy day was not a disaster for business, it was a windfall. Account books from the covered cloth halls of medieval Flanders show a remarkable pattern. Winter and autumn revenues often matched or even surpassed those of the sunnier seasons. The architects had turned an environmental challenge into their greatest ally, ensuring that bad weather did not mean bad business. It meant a captive, receptive audience with nowhere else to go. The market was a living organism, breathing in and out with the changing sky, always finding a way to turn nature's whims into a steady stream of coins. A splash of crimson on a canvas of oak and stone was never just for decoration. The medieval marketplace was a vibrant tapestry of deliberate color, a visual language as carefully constructed as its winding alleys. Vendors painted their stalls and hung specific banners not for mere beauty, but to communicate instantly with a largely illiterate population. A deep, rich red above a stall was a universal signal for the butcher, a color that evoked both the raw vitality of meat and the skilled bloodletting of his trade. A brilliant blue, often made from the precious woad plant, was reserved for the cloth merchants, immediately signaling luxury and high value to any shopper scanning the crowded square. These were not suggestions, they were commands for the eye, designed to cut through the noise and guide your feet without a single word being spoken. This was a system of instant recognition, built on centuries of tradition and often enforced by the merchant guilds themselves. Their rulebooks stipulated which colors could be used for which trades, standardizing the visual landscape to reduce confusion and speed the flow of commerce. A shopper in a hurry for a new tunic knew to look for the blue banner, just as someone seeking a hot meal would follow the warm yellows and browns of the baker's sign. This visual shorthand eliminated the paralysis of choice, making the overwhelming maze feel suddenly navigable. But this efficiency was a clever disguise for a deeper psychological play. The colors were chosen not just for clarity, but for the powerful emotional responses they triggered. The red of the butcher's stall was energizing and primal, sharpening the appetite. The blue of the clothier was calming and associated with wealth and the Virgin Mary, making the high cost of fine fabric feel like a righteous indulgence. The most expensive items were always framed by the most expensive colors. A spice merchant might drape his stall in purples and golds, colors traditionally linked to royalty and divinity, to subconsciously elevate his exotic peppercorns and cinnamon into objects worthy of reverence and a nobleman's ransom. Meanwhile, a potter selling simple, functional cookware would use earthy, muted browns and greens, signaling practicality and a fair, down-to-earth price. This strategic use of color created a visual hierarchy of desire right before the shopper's eyes. Your gaze was naturally pulled toward the brightest, most saturated points in the market, which were always the stalls with the highest profit margins. The architecture funneled your body, and the color palette then guided your gaze, working in perfect harmony to ensure you saw exactly what the merchants wanted you to see first. In an age before branded logos, the stall itself was the brand, and its colors were the unforgettable jingle that drew you in. This careful choreography of color and sound set the stage for a deeper economic dance happening between the stalls themselves. The physical closeness of two vendors was rarely an accident. It was a strategic calculation. A cheesemonger would pay a premium to set up his stall directly beside the most popular baker in the market, knowing that the steady stream of customers leaving with a warm loaf would be irresistibly tempted by a wedge of fine cheese to go with it. This was the economics of proximity in action, a silent collaboration that turned neighboring stalls into powerful sales allies. Their goods were complementary, each one making the other more desirable and creating a natural bundle purchase that felt like the customer's own brilliant idea. Guild records from places like 13th century Paris show that these arrangements were often formalized, with strict rules and even fines for vendors who tried to disrupt these beneficial partnerships by moving their stall to a more selfish location. The market's architects understood that a rising tide lifted all boats, and they designed the entire marketplace to function as a single, cohesive ecosystem. But this spirit of cooperation had its limits. Direct competitors were almost always kept far apart. You would never find two silversmiths of equal quality positioned side by side. Such an arrangement would have been commercial suicide for the market itself, forcing customers into a direct comparison that would inevitably make one seller look inferior and depress the price for both. Instead, rivals were strategically separated, often placed at opposite ends of the market's main loop. This forced shoppers to pass dozens of other tempting stalls on their journey to compare prices, dramatically increasing the odds of an impulse purchase along the way and ensuring that the market as a whole profited from the competition, not just the individual merchant. This delicate balance between collaboration and competition was the invisible engine of the medieval marketplace. It transformed a collection of individual sellers into a finely tuned machine for generating wealth, proving that sometimes the most important business deal was not what you sold, but who you sold next to. Even the air in the marketplace was a canvas for illusion. In the most exclusive corners of the medieval world, merchants discovered a final, brilliant tool for bending reality: the polished surface. While most stalls relied on wood and cloth, the elite sellers of Byzantium and a few Italian city-states employed sheets of polished bronze, silver, or even precious early glass to line their displays. These were not for vanity, they were psychological instruments designed to manipulate perception itself. A single, exquisite bolt of silk, when placed before a polished metal sheet, would appear to double or triple in quantity. A merchant's small collection of precious gems could be transformed into a glittering, seemingly endless treasure, hoarded with nothing more than a cleverly placed mirror. This was a masterclass in manufactured abundance. The goal was to overwhelm the shopper's eye with a spectacle of plenty, creating an irresistible illusion of unlimited choice and immense wealth. The merchant was not just selling a product, he was selling the intoxicating fantasy of being surrounded by boundless luxury. This visual trick preyed on a deep human desire, the love of plenty. A shopper confronted with this dazzling, multiplied display felt a surge of excitement and opportunity. It suggested that here, in this very stall, were the finest goods in such supply that they could afford to be choosy, to take their time, and yet also that such riches might not last. This clever deception justified a premium price, as the atmosphere of sheer opulence made any cost seem reasonable within such a grand setting. The reflective surface served a second, more subtle purpose. It brought light to life. Candle flames and sunlight danced and multiplied across these polished plains, creating a dynamic play of light that made every jewel sparkle and every silk shimmer with an almost magical quality. The stall was no longer a static display, it was a living, breathing cavern of wonders. For a wealthy clientele accustomed to the finest things, this extra layer of spectacle was the ultimate sales pitch. It turned a simple transaction into an immersive experience, making the customer feel they were not just buying a luxury, but stepping into a world of reflected grandeur. The merchant's genius was in understanding that sometimes the most valuable thing he could offer was not the object itself, but the breathtaking illusion that surrounded it. Navigational confusion was a carefully planned revenue stream. These markets were not designed for your convenience, they were designed for your prolonged exposure. Beyond the main arteries of commerce lay a secondary network of pathways, a labyrinth of intentional dead ends and looping alleys that turned a simple shopping trip into a disorienting puzzle. A shopper with a single item on their list could easily find themselves walking in circles, passing the same fruit stand 3 times, each wrong turn extending their stay and increasing their chances of a spontaneous purchase born from frustration or sheer curiosity. The layout of a city like Siena was a masterclass in this strategy. Its central market zone was a tangle of streets that seemed to lead nowhere, funneling visitors away from direct exits and into a series of enclosed courtyards and narrow passages. What should have been a 5-minute errand could effortlessly stretch into an hour-long adventure, all because the architects understood a fundamental truth about human psychology. The desire to find your way out is almost as powerful as the desire to find a bargain. Every dead end, marked perhaps by a quiet fountain or a lone bench, was not a rest stop. It was a moment of pause, a forced hesitation where your eyes would inevitably scan the surrounding stalls for a familiar landmark, only to be caught by a new display of goods. That moment of looking was all a skilled merchant needed to engage you, and the looping paths ensured that even your attempts to backtrack would lead you past a fresh set of temptations. This design capitalized on 2 competing instincts: our deep-seated aversion to being lost and our innate curiosity to explore. The result was a state of mild, manageable anxiety that made shoppers more susceptible to suggestion. Finding the correct path out felt like a reward, and what better way to celebrate that small victory than with an unplanned purchase? The merchant did not just sell you a product, he sold you a solution to the confusion his marketplace had created. In the grand economics of the maze, your time was the currency, and every wrong turn was a deposit straight into the coffers of the guild. A towering cathedral did more than inspire awe, it anchored the entire economy. The most powerful psychological tool in the medieval market was not a stall or a pathway, but the silent, imposing authority of the church or town hall looming over the square. Placing the marketplace directly in the shadow of these structures was a masterstroke of psychological engineering. It bathed every transaction, every haggled price and exchanged coin in an unspoken aura of trust and communal sanction. You are not just buying bread from a stranger, you are participating in a sanctioned civic ritual under the watchful gaze of God and King. This association dramatically reduced the innate hesitation of a buyer. Spending money felt less like a risky gamble and more like a virtuous contribution to the ordered life of the community, a notion carefully cultivated by the ruling classes. The weekly market held in the square before the great cathedral of Chartres is a perfect example. Pilgrims arriving to venerate sacred relics would find themselves funneled directly into a bustling commercial zone. Their spiritual journey seamlessly transitioned into an economic one, their pious mindset making them exceptionally receptive to purchasing a commemorative badge, a beeswax candle for offering, or a vial of blessed water. The line between devotion and commerce was intentionally blurred. A purchase made here felt like an extension of worship, a tangible piece of the divine experience to carry home. This strategy ensured participation from every level of society. A noblewoman could alms to the poor at the church door and then, without breaking stride, commission a jeweled reliquary from a goldsmith across the square, her charity and her luxury equally validated by the shared space. A common farmer selling his eggs near the town hall felt the legitimacy of his trade reinforced by the symbols of justice and order just steps away. The architecture created a powerful feedback loop where commerce gained morality from the church, and the church gained economic vitality from the market. Spending money was framed not as greed, but as a natural, even righteous part of civic and spiritual life. This clever alignment of values turned the marketplace into a stage where every purchase, from the most humble to the most extravagant, felt like an act of belonging. A grand wooden archway marked the entrance to a different world. These seasonal fairs were the ultimate expression of the merchant's art, where the entire commercial landscape was temporary, intense, and deliberately fleeting. Using lightweight timber frames and colorful canvas, builders could erect an entire city of commerce in a matter of days, a maze designed to exist for only a few precious weeks before vanishing without a trace. This impermanence was the entire point. The knowledge that this dazzling spectacle of goods would soon be gone created a powerful, almost frantic urgency in every visitor. You were not just shopping, you were seizing a limited time opportunity that might not come again for another year. The layouts of these temporary markets were often even more manipulative than their permanent counterparts. They featured grand, theatrical entrances that built anticipation, leading into themed sections that told a story. A row of stalls might be dedicated entirely to the exotic wonders of the Levant, draped in silks and filled with the scent of rare spices, while another avenue celebrated the finest woolens of Flanders. This thematic organization transformed browsing from a chore into an adventure, making every purchase feel like a souvenir from a distant land. Chronicles from the great Champagne fairs describe the staggering sums of money that changed hands. A successful merchant could indeed earn a year's worth of income in a single season, all because the architecture was engineered to maximize the psychological power of the event. The very temporariness of the wooden stalls and brightly colored awnings screamed that this was not a normal market day. It was a celebration, a suspension of the ordinary rules, and in that atmosphere of collective excitement, people's inhibitions melted away. Spending felt like part of the fun. By mastering the art of the temporary, merchants discovered that the most powerful sales pitch of all was not a discounted price, but a disappearing chance. Currency exchanges were the silent conductors of the market's financial symphony. These vital figures were not placed at random, but at precise psychological choke points to orchestrate the flow of coins. A visitor arriving from a distant region would find their first stop not at a tempting stall, but at a money changer's table just inside the main gate. This was a masterful piece of behavioral design. Before you had even seen a single luxury good, you were already engaging in a financial transaction, converting your foreign coin into the local currency. This act subtly normalized the idea of spending, breaking down your initial resistance and priming your mind to view your purse not as a protected hoard, but as a tool for immediate use. The mental barrier between saving and spending was dismantled at the very entrance. For those spending locally, toll collectors performed a similar function. Positioned at bridges or narrow archways that controlled access to the main market, their demand for a small entry fee served a dual purpose. It raised revenue, of course, but more importantly, it formalized the act of payment as the price of admission to this world of wonders. You had already invested in the experience before you had even bought anything, creating a subconscious desire to justify that initial cost with further purchases. This strategy of front-loading financial interactions was devastatingly effective. Ledgers from the great trading hubs like Lübeck show that markets which consciously integrated these financial gatekeepers into their architectural plans consistently reported higher overall sales. But the manipulation did not end at the entrance. Many larger markets featured dedicated payment areas, quiet alcoves or designated benches set slightly apart from the main bustle. This was not for the shopper's convenience, but to isolate the critical moment of transaction. By moving the haggling and payment away from the sensory overload of the stall, the merchant could focus your attention solely on the price. The sudden quiet was a psychological reset, making the negotiated sum feel like a final, settled agreement reached through calm deliberation, rather than an impulsive decision made under duress. It made the act of paying feel like a natural, inevitable conclusion, just another step in the process, from the first coin you handed over at the gate to the last purchase settled in a quiet corner. Every financial action was carefully staged to feel routine, reducing the friction of spending until it became as effortless as walking the market's predetermined path. Hooves and wheels dictated the market's very shape. Beyond the psychological tricks of color and sound, the medieval marketplace faced a far more practical challenge: the constant, chaotic flow of carts delivering goods and livestock being brought in for sale. This was not a problem to be solved, but a force to be harnessed. Town planners engineered the entire layout to separate these dangerous and disruptive streams of traffic from the leisurely flow of shoppers, creating a hidden network of efficiency beneath the apparent chaos. Wide, sturdy thoroughfares, often paved with rougher stone, were designated specifically for carts. These routes would loop around the outer edges of the main market square, allowing merchants to unload their barrels of wine and sacks of grain directly into the rear of stalls without ever interrupting a single haggling session in the front. Meanwhile, the narrow, winding alleys we associate with medieval markets were reserved almost exclusively for foot traffic, their cramped nature now revealed as a deliberate design choice to keep them free of wagons and animals. This separation was a matter of safety and commercial necessity. A single panicked cow or a cart with a broken axle could bring the entire economy of the market to a grinding halt. By creating these dedicated lanes, architects prevented accidents and ensured that the shopping experience remained, above all, pleasant. No one spends freely when they are anxiously watching for runaway pigs or dodging muddy wheel ruts. This engineered flow also spawned entire secondary economies. Those outer cart lanes naturally became bustling hubs themselves, lined with entrepreneurial smiths offering emergency wheel repairs and vendors selling buckets of water and bundles of feed for the waiting animals. The needs of the infrastructure created new markets, each one another opportunity for profit. Surviving town plans from places like Winchester show this logic clearly. The main market street is a wide, clear space for commerce, but it is fed by a spiderweb of smaller service alleys, each one designed for a specific purpose. This was the market's circulatory system, and its efficient pulse was what kept the heart of commerce beating strong. By managing the messy reality of animals and carts, the planners did not just prevent chaos, they built a foundation of convenience and safety that made everyone, from the wealthiest merchant to the humblest farmer, feel secure enough to open their purse. A river was far more than a scenic backdrop. It was the market's primary conveyor belt, a natural highway that delivered goods directly to the merchant's back door and carried away the waste of commerce without a single cart needing to move. The gurgling water masked the noise of butchers cleaning their stalls and tanners rinsing hides, while its constant flow ensured the unpleasant byproducts of a bustling economy simply vanished downstream. This ingenious use of a natural resource kept the marketplace cleaner and more efficient, allowing the pleasant aromas of baking bread and spiced wine to dominate the air. A hill was not an obstacle to be flattened, but a pedestal to be exploited. Planners would often reserve the highest ground for the most luxurious goods. The climb to these elevated stalls was a deliberate filter, separating the casual browser from the determined, wealthy patron. Reaching the top was its own reward, offering a commanding view of the bustling market below and a sense of exclusivity that justified a higher price tag. A shopper who had made the effort to ascend would feel a subconscious need to make the journey worthwhile with a significant purchase. Even the humble tree was co-opted into this grand design. A large, ancient oak at the center of a square did not just provide shade, it created a natural congregation point. Merchants would pay a premium to set up stalls within its cooling shadow, knowing that this was where deals were brokered, news was exchanged, and crowds naturally gathered to rest. This organic meeting place became a hub of social and commercial activity, all centered on a feature that cost the town council nothing to install. Archaeological digs in towns like Shrewsbury reveal how market layouts meticulously followed the contour of the land. A gentle slope was utilized for natural drainage, keeping the streets mud-free after a rain. A rocky outcrop became the foundation for the money changer's sturdy stall, a symbol of permanence and security. By weaving their designs into the existing tapestry of the environment, these medieval architects created marketplaces that were not only supremely functional but felt inherently right, as if they had always belonged there. The most profitable market was one that felt completely natural, even as every tree, stream, and hillock was silently working to guide your hand to your purse. Roman grid plans were not abandoned, they were repurposed for profit. The straight, orderly streets of a Roman garrison town, designed for moving legions quickly, became the perfect skeleton for a medieval market. Medieval planners looked at these ancient ruins and saw a ready-made framework for controlling crowds. They inherited the Roman Forum's central plaza and simply changed its purpose from a civic square into a commercial powerhouse, keeping the colonnades that provided shelter for stalls and the raised platforms that made goods visible from a distance. This was not a loss of knowledge, but a clever evolution. The classical design provided an immediate sense of order, permanence, and grandeur that a haphazard collection of stalls could never achieve. A shopper walking into a market built within old Roman walls felt they were participating in something established and important, a feeling that made them more trusting and, crucially, more willing to spend. In London, the great market of Cheapside grew directly atop the ruins of a Roman marketplace. Its long, straight thoroughfare followed the exact path of a Roman road, a design that effortlessly funneled thousands of people from the city gates right into the heart of commerce. The medieval vendors simply set up their stalls along this ancient highway, benefiting from centuries of pre-planned foot traffic. This classical inheritance was a powerful marketing tool in itself. A merchant could claim his family had traded on that very spot for generations, linking his wares to a tradition of quality and stability that justified a higher price. Wealthier clients from out of town were naturally drawn to these organized Roman-esque markets, perceiving them as more civilized and reputable than the makeshift fairs in the countryside. By building upon a Roman foundation, medieval architects did not just create a market, they crafted an experience of refined urban living, where every purchase felt connected to a glorious past. This intricate architecture of trust could be weaponized in an instant. For every honest merchant using the market's design to showcase his wares, a dishonest one could twist those same principles into a trap. The very narrow alleys that created a sense of urgency and intimacy were also perfect hunting grounds for pickpockets, who could brush against a victim and vanish into the pressing crowd before the missing purse was even noticed. A dimly lit corner created by the overhang of two stalls was not just a place for a quiet deal. It could be a spot where a buyer was cornered into accepting counterfeit coins or goods they never agreed to purchase. The market's engineered chaos provided the perfect cover for exploitation. Court records from medieval York tell a chillingly common story. A woman named Agnes brought a lawsuit against a cloth seller, claiming he had pulled her into a recessed doorway off the main thoroughfare. In that confined, isolated space, he pressured her into paying an inflated price for fabric she later discovered was of a much lower quality than what was shown in the open square. The design of the stall itself had facilitated the fraud. This dark side of the maze was a constant threat, a reminder that the same features that made the market vibrant and exciting could also make it dangerously unpredictable for the unwary. Regulations were constantly being updated to combat these practices, with town councils forbidding the construction of stalls with hidden back areas or mandating that all transactions occur in full public view. Yet the ingenuity of deception always seemed to find a way, proving that the pursuit of profit, when utterly unchecked by ethics, could turn the merchant's maze into a predator's den. These ancient blueprints did not vanish with the rise of modernity. They simply traded stone and timber for glass, steel, and digital code. The sprawling shopping mall is the direct architectural descendant of the medieval market, a climate-controlled maze where the same psychological principles are executed with scientific precision. The wide, inviting entrance that funnels you inward, the strategically placed anchor stores that serve as modern-day bakers and butchers, the looping pathways designed to prevent easy escape, they are all there. Even the artificial scarcity of a locked display case has its echo in the limited-time online flash sale, a digital version of the seasonal fair that screams now or never. The goal remains unchanged: to maximize your exposure to goods and minimize your resistance to spending. By recognizing this unbroken lineage, you gain a powerful new lens through which to view your own consumer behavior. That feeling of disorientation in a large department store is not a personal failing. It is the funnel effect working as intended centuries ago. The urgency you feel when a website announces only 3 items left in stock is the same manufactured anxiety that compelled a medieval shopper to buy that last bolt of silk. These are not new tricks, they are ancient strategies wearing contemporary disguises. Case studies of major retail chains reveal that their most effective floor plans are often directly inspired by historical market layouts, proving that human psychology is the one constant in the ever-evolving game of commerce. This awareness is your greatest defense when you understand that the cheerful chaos of a supermarket entrance, with its vibrant flower displays and aroma of baking bread, is a deliberate sensory attack meant to lower your guard. You can choose to engage with it differently. You are no longer a passive subject in a grand experiment of influence, but an informed participant who can see the strings. The history of the merchant's maze is not a relic, it is a living map to the modern world of spending, and knowing its paths is the first step to walking them on your own terms. But every powerful tool demands responsibility. The same architectural genius that created vibrant centers of trade could also be twisted into instruments of pure exploitation, forcing medieval societies to confront a timeless question. Where is the line between clever persuasion and outright deception? Town councils and guilds were not blind to the potential for abuse within their own designs. They recognized that for commerce to thrive over generations, it required a foundation of trust. This led to some of the earliest consumer protection laws in history. Standardized measures for cloth, grain, and wine were enforced, with official iron rods and brass vessels kept in the town hall to prevent a merchant from using a falsely small bushel or a secretly stretched L stick. Designated inspection points, often marked by a public fountain or a specific carved stone, were established where officials could examine goods for quality and weight. A butcher selling spoiled meat or a baker hiding a stone in his loaf of bread faced severe fines, public shaming in the stocks, or even banishment from the market. These rules were the necessary counterweight to the market's psychological power, ensuring the maze guided choice but did not obliterate it. We face these very same ethical dilemmas today. The digital marketplaces we navigate are built with algorithms designed to exploit our cognitive biases, creating filter bubbles and endless scrolls that are the modern equivalent of the inescapable circular path. The cheerful chaos of a supermarket's entrance with its bright lights and enticing smells is a carefully engineered sensory experience meant to lower our guard. The question is no longer about the effectiveness of these designs, but about their intent. Do they empower us with choice or simply shepherd us toward a purchase? By looking back at the medieval balance between profit and fairness, we find a crucial perspective for our modern debates. It reminds us that commerce is a relationship, not a conquest. The goal should be to design spaces, both physical and digital, that thrive on genuine value and transparent engagement, not on psychological trickery. A market that honors both the merchant's craft and the consumer's autonomy doesn't just create a single sale, it builds an economy that lasts. This awareness transforms you from a passive consumer into an active participant in the marketplace. The same psychological triggers used in medieval town squares are alive and well in your local supermarket or favorite online store. The wide, welcoming entrance of a modern shopping mall, often filled with enticing smells from a food court or the vibrant display of a seasonal sale, is the direct descendant of the overwhelming market gate. Its purpose is identical: to immediately engage your senses and set a tone of abundance and excitement, lowering your rational defenses before you even begin your journey. For the mindful shopper, recognizing these patterns is your greatest defense. When you feel the store layout subtly guiding you to the right, understand that this is a deliberate funnel designed to maximize your exposure to high-margin items. That irresistible aroma of freshly baked bread is not a happy accident. It is a calculated sensory anchor placed near the entrance to create a positive association and trigger hunger, making you more likely to make impulse purchases throughout your trip. Online, the endless scroll of a shopping website is the digital equivalent of the circular market path with no exit, engineered to keep you exploring and discovering for just a little bit longer. Entrepreneurs and small business owners can draw powerful lessons from this ancient playbook. You do not need a grand cathedral or a town wall to apply these principles. Simply organizing a market stall or a retail space to create a natural flow of traffic can dramatically increase engagement. Place your most attractive or popular item in a spot that forces circulation, ensuring customers see your full range of products. Think like a medieval guild and strategically position complementary goods near each other. A coffee roaster might station a local pastry chef nearby, creating a symbiotic relationship that benefits both vendors and feels like a natural convenience to the customer. Even a website can be structured with forced circulation in mind. Instead of a single linear path to checkout, consider a design that offers intriguing, related suggestions or reveals new content as the user scrolls, gently encouraging them to complete the loop of your digital marketplace. The goal is not to trick customers, but to create an environment that is genuinely engaging and easy to navigate, increasing the opportunity for them to find value they might have otherwise missed. By adopting these historical insights, we reclaim our agency. we can appreciate the craft of commercial design while choosing to spend our time and money with intention, turning centuries of mercantile wisdom into our own personal advantage. 26 strategies from the grand entrance to the final temptation at the exit reveal a system of stunning sophistication. This was not mere architecture, it was applied psychology, a blend of art, science, and pure cunning that turned space itself into a tool for economic control. The legacy of these medieval masters is not confined to history books. It is all around us. The next time you find yourself instinctively turning right upon entering a department store, or feeling a sudden urge to buy a chocolate bar while waiting in a grocery checkout line, you are walking a path they designed. The maze has simply been rebuilt in glass, steel, and digital code. This knowledge is your map. It allows you to see the invisible strings guiding your choices, to appreciate the craft behind the commerce, and ultimately, to make more mindful decisions with your time and your coins. If you enjoyed this journey through the merchant's maze, feel free to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden patterns. Let us know in the comments what modern market tricks you have spotted in your own shopping adventures. Until next time, stay curious and may your future purchases be both joyful and wise.